It might be tempting to think that Hollywood and its stars have hit their worst point in terms of ethics. It seems like scandals have been a part of the movie business ever since it began. From secret affairs to blackmail schemes, strap in because we're back with 10 more golden Hollywood scandals that were covered up. Number 10. Loretta Young adopted her own child. Loretta Young was an iconic figure of her time, known not just for her striking beauty, but also for her exceptional talent and success as an actress. She had achieved a level of recognition and acclaim that most could only dream of, culminating in her receipt of an Academy Award for her stunning performance in The Farmer's Daughter in 1947. However, despite all of her accomplishments and accolades, Young was hiding a secret that she would keep hidden for over 3 decades. It all began in 1935 after Young had finished filming The Call of the Wild. At that point, she vanished from public view, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and speculation. When she finally re-emerged 18 months later, she had a young girl with her, whom she claimed to have adopted. The child, named Judy, became an integral part of Young's life from that point on. However, the truth of the matter was far more complex than Young ever let on. As it turns out, Judy was not actually adopted at all. She was, in fact, the biological daughter of Loretta Young and Clark Gable, one of the biggest movie stars of the era. Young had kept the truth hidden from everyone, including her daughter, for more than 3 decades. Young was a devout Catholic, and it is believed that her faith played a significant role in her decision not to terminate the pregnancy. Instead, she chose to keep the child and raise her as her own. For over 30 years, the truth remained a closely guarded secret, with rumors swirling throughout Hollywood about the true identity of Young's daughter. It was only after Young's death that the truth was finally revealed in a memoir that she had written before passing away. Number 9. Joan Crawford did a porno. Joan Crawford was a force to be reckoned with at MGM, a blazing star with an unrelenting drive to succeed. She secured an Academy Award for her stellar performance in the iconic film Mildred Pierce in 1945, alongside a slew of other accolades. She was the epitome of Hollywood royalty. However, amidst all her glory, rumors swirled about her past, claiming she had kick-started her career with a smutty film called Velvet Lips. Her own brother was reportedly peddling copies of the scandalous movie to the highest bidder, making things more uncomfortable for Crawford. Yet the film had disappeared into thin air, possibly erased by the powerful studio execs, whose job was to sweep under the rug any dirty secrets of their stars. Joan Crawford's first husband, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., spilled the beans that she was once targeted by blackmailers who threatened to expose her scandalous past. They even went so far as calling her on her honeymoon to intimidate her. A film was sent to the studio, but Crawford's lawyers denied it was her in the film, despite Fairbanks' affirmation that it was indeed her. Even though Crawford denied being involved in any pornographic films until her dying breath, her FBI file paints a different picture. It seems to confirm the existence of the compromising footage. According to her biographers, the film was widely circulated and was often showcased at raunchy, men-only stag parties, fueling the rumors about Crawford's past. According to sources, it was revealed that the studio allegedly paid her brother an enormous sum, reportedly around $100,000, to prevent him from exposing the scandalous film. This is backed up by the fact that she made mysterious payments to the studio, supposedly to reimburse them for the hush money. Even after her passing, her family troubles persisted. Crawford's daughter, who had been cut off from her inheritance, wrote a sensational memoir titled Mommy Dearest, which shed a different light on the famous actress. Number 8. Jean Harlow was forced to marry. Jean Harlow, the iconic blonde bombshell, rose to fame with her breakthrough role in Howard Hughes' movie Hell's Angels. However, her life was far from smooth sailing. At the tender age of 15, she married her first husband, But the marriage didn't last long, and they divorced within a few years. Her second husband tragically died in a gun accident, which fueled rumors that she was responsible for his death. Jean Harlow's life was full of drama and scandal. She had a steamy affair with a married boxer, which created quite the stir in Hollywood. In an attempt to save face, the studio pressured her into a sham marriage with Harold Rawson, which they quietly dissolved once the scandal died down. However, Harlow's heart belonged to William Powell, with whom she had fallen head over heels during the filming of Reckless in 1935. She dreamed of marrying him, settling down, and starting a family. But Powell, who had recently divorced Carol Lombard, was cautious. He feared public backlash if he remarried too soon, and made it clear that he never wanted children, crushing Harlow's hopes for a happy ending. Despite Powell's reservations about starting a family, Jean Harlow became pregnant with his child. However, she was aware that Powell was not ready for fatherhood, and the studio would not tolerate an unwed mother. Therefore, Harlow made the difficult decision to terminate her pregnancy, keeping the heartbreaking news a secret from Powell. Number 7. William Randolph Hearst tried to shoot Charlie Chaplin and killed someone else instead. William Randolph Hearst was not your average businessman, but a towering figure with an unrivaled media empire, considerable political clout, and a reputation for being ruthless and quick-tempered. Orson Welles even immortalized him in his cinematic masterpiece, Citizen Kane. Given how irritable Hearst was, he wouldn't like it if his woman cheated on him. There were rumors that Marion Davies, who had been with Hearst for a long time, was having an encounter with none other than Charlie Chaplin. Hearst came up with a clever plan. Instead of directly confronting Chaplin, he asked Chaplin and a group of other important people in the movie business to join him on his boat, which could have been awkward for everyone. One can only think how tense the small talk must have been on that doomed trip. Thomas Ince was a Hollywood producer who focused on making westerns and had a successful studio that eventually began to decline. In search of funding, Ince joined Hearst's yacht with the hope that the excursion would turn his fortunes around, which it did. According to the official story that was quickly published in Hearst's newspapers, Ince died from digestive issues despite receiving prompt medical attention. Ince's body was promptly cremated. Even though Hearst made considerable efforts to manage the news about Ince's death, speculation persisted that Hearst had aimed at Chaplin, missed, and accidentally shot Ince instead. The Los Angeles Times initially ran the headline, "Movie Producer Shot on Hearst Yacht," but it was quickly removed, and later editions made no reference to the shooting. A secretary who was on the yacht stated that he witnessed Ince with a gunshot wound to his head. Ince's spouse was not around to provide feedback because she had abruptly left for a trip to Europe. Number 6. Tallulah Bankhead had multiple abortions. Tallulah Bankhead was known in Hollywood for her legendary sexual escapades, garnering just as much attention for her sultry conquests as for her stunning looks that made the world swoon. Rumor has it that she had so many lovers that she lost count after reaching 185 notches on her bedpost. But the road to stardom wasn't without its challenges for Bankhead. Aware that becoming pregnant could jeopardize her career, she made the difficult decision to undergo 4 abortions by the time she turned 30. And she wasn't alone. The studios had a system in place to discreetly handle such situations, sneaking actresses into hospitals under false names and only allowing their own doctors to attend to them. Visits from anyone else were strictly off limits. Bankhead was a frequent visitor to the hospital, but her marriage to a man was short-lived and unfulfilling, as she only accepted his proposal because he was the only one to ask her. Her sexual proclivities were the stuff of legend. She indulged in affairs with both men and women, often in scandalous, public places. Not content with simply shocking her visitors, she would even answer the door in the nude, inviting them to feast their eyes on her beauty. But Bankhead's outrageous behavior didn't stop there. She once caused quite a stir during a Broadway performance when she supposedly exposed herself to the audience, causing a priest and 3 nuns to leave in disgust. Ironically, Bankhead would come to regret her past decisions. Her 4 abortions left her unable to bear children, and when she later contracted gonorrhea, she had to undergo a hysterectomy, forever depriving her of the chance to start a family. Number 5. Patricia Douglas was raped. Patricia Douglas was a wide-eyed dreamer who, at the tender age of 20, received a coveted invitation to audition for MGM Studios. Little did she know that the audition was actually a debauched party thrown by none other than Louis B. Mayer himself, exclusively for the entertainment of MGM's sales executives. By the time Douglas arrived, the party had already been raging for a full 3 days, and she was convinced that this was her long-awaited opportunity to make it big. Unfortunately, Douglas was naively inexperienced, a pure-hearted virgin hailing from the small town of Kansas City, Missouri. And she was far from alone. Approximately 120 other young women were brought in by bus to entertain nearly 300 drunken delegates at a remote ranch. Clad in skimpy cowboy hats, short skirts, and boots, the girls were lured with the promise of a hot meal and a meager $7.50 for a full day's work. The unsuspecting girls arrived at the set with stars in their eyes, blissfully unaware that they were being used as pawns in a lecherous game. With their makeup done to perfection, they patiently waited for their cue, eager to make a good impression and hopefully snag their big break in Hollywood. But the executives had other ideas in mind. They saw the girls as little more than objects to be ogled and groped at will. Trapped with no means of transportation or communication, they were forced to fend off advances from the predatory men with whatever means they had at their disposal. Despite her innocence, Douglas fell victim to a heinous act of rape at the hands of MGM salesman David Ross. In a shocking display of courage and defiance, she refused to be silenced or bought off like so many others in Hollywood, and instead chose to pursue legal action against her attacker. However, MGM hired the Pinkerton Detective Agency to investigate Douglas. When they failed, they forced people to propagate lies about her promiscuity and sexually transmitted illness. Even the parking lot attendant, who had initially claimed to have witnessed the attack, later changed his story under the pressure of MGM's tactics. His own children eventually came forward to admit that his later statements were completely untrue. As a result, Douglas's good name was destroyed, and her attacker escaped without consequence for his despicable crime. Number 4. Errol Flynn was a pervert. Errol Flynn, the notorious Hollywood icon, was widely known for his insatiable sexual desires. In fact, his scandalous trial for the statutory rape of 2 young girls led to the popularization of the phrase, "in like Flynn." Despite the charges, he managed to escape punishment and emerged as an even more irresistible Lothario. But his path to stardom was anything but ordinary. He started off as a fearless river guide, braving crocodiles and dodging arrows from headhunters for a film crew. It was during one of these daring expeditions that he was discovered and offered a role in a remake of the classic movie Mutiny on the Bounty. Alongside his notable attraction to underage girls, Errol Flynn was also trailed by a slew of salacious rumors. Apparently, he popped his cherry at a tender age of 10 and installed a two-way mirror in his bedroom, with another rumored to be in his bathroom. Fueled by intoxicating substances, Flynn was notorious for his sexual experiments. However, despite his controversial antics, the public remained enamored with him. Sadly, the Hollywood icon passed away at the young age of 50 due to a heart attack. But to make matters worse, it's been alleged that the coroners at the inquest took home a collection of genital warts from his body as twisted souvenirs. Number 3. Judy Garland was forced to take drugs. Back in 1935, a young Judy Garland was discovered by an MGM talent scout. Despite her incredible singing voice and acting chops, the studio wasn't exactly smitten with her looks. Regardless, they took a chance on her and threw her into the limelight, working her to the bone with grueling schedules of up to 18 hours a day, 6 days a week. To keep up with the demands, the studio provided her with amphetamines to keep her going and sleeping pills to knock her out when the day was done. As if that wasn't enough, Garland dared to fall in love and marry at the tender age of 19, much to the chagrin of the studio. They wasted no time in ordering her back to work a mere 24 hours after her nuptials. But the real kicker? When she became pregnant, they didn't even let her have the chance to become a mother, arranging for her to have a heartbreaking abortion. In her early 20s, Judy had become heavily dependent on amphetamines, a fact that became apparent during her work on Meet Me in St. Louis. The studio, purportedly to keep her safe, isolated her from others and even deducted money from her paychecks to recoup losses from sick days. At one point, Garland recognized her need for help and checked herself into a hospital to address her sleeping and eating habits. However, her efforts were short-lived as the studio pressured her to lose weight, and she turned back to the pills. As her life spiraled out of control, the very studios that had once profited from her talents abandoned her. It was a tragic end for the star, who ultimately passed away from a barbiturate overdose at just 47 years old. Number 2. George Raft really was a gangster. George Raft was a true master of playing tough guys in Hollywood, often portraying convicts, crooks, and mobsters on the big screen. But it wasn't just his acting talent that caught the eye of casting directors. Raft's own associations with notorious mobsters may have also played a role. In fact, his first role was as a coin-tossing henchman in Scarface, a fitting start to a career that would become defined by gritty roles. Raft's connections to the mob ran deep. Growing up in Hell's Kitchen, he learned to flip coins from none other than his best friend, Benjamin "Bugsy" Siegel, who would go on to become a notorious mobster in his own right. Raft himself even admitted to running bootleg liquor operations for the underworld. And when it came to breaking into the movie business, Siegel, with his own connections to the industry, was instrumental in getting Raft his first big break. It's no surprise then that the mafia never seemed too far from Raft's work in Hollywood. In fact, Al Capone himself even showed the director of Scarface how to handle a Tommy gun. Talk about being in the thick of it. Number 1. Alfred Hitchcock was a stalker. Alfred Hitchcock was a director with a unique style. Despite being married for over 5 decades, he maintained that he had only ever had sex once. Nevertheless, he became infatuated with his leading ladies, as Grace Kelly and Janet Leigh discovered firsthand. Both actresses reportedly experienced Hitchcock's controlling tendencies, with him prohibiting them from speaking to other cast members or driving to the set with anyone else. However, it was Tippi Hedren who was most affected by Hitchcock's obsession. Riding high on the success of Psycho, Hitchcock selected the relatively unknown actress to star in The Birds, which catapulted her to fame. Unfortunately, she was also bound by a contract with Hitchcock that left her in a vulnerable position. On the set of The Birds, Hitchcock forbade other cast members from interacting with Hedren or even touching her. Meanwhile, he told Hedren that her co-stars didn't like her, making her feel isolated and uncomfortable. Hitchcock made repeated advances towards her, all of which she rebuffed. Hedren believes that the scenes in which her character was attacked by birds were actually Hitchcock's way of extracting revenge. Rather than using mechanical crows as intended, he opted to use live birds for a scene in The Birds. The birds were attached to Tippi Hedren with elastic, which caused them distress and led them to attacking her. The filming of one scene where real birds attacked her in a bedroom took 5 grueling days. Hedren eventually reached her breaking point with Hitchcock. She allegedly called him a fat pig and rejected his advances, which caused Hitchcock to become vindictive towards her. He never worked with her again, but also prevented her from working with other directors. Despite winning an award for her work on the birds, Hitchcock refused to give her time off to collect it. Hedren also claims that Hitchcock actively worked against her to prevent her from receiving an Oscar nomination for her role. Although she continued to work, her career never fully recovered from the negative impact of her association with Hitchcock. Wow, Hollywood has never been short of drama, has it? We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into 10 more golden Hollywood scandals that were covered up. These stories may have been swept under the rug at the time, but we're here to bring them to light. Alright, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.